Cube 2 Hypercube is a sequel to the low-budget cult classic. The original had a very small but inventive set, almost no money with which to get made, and no distribution, but through the hard work of its director, managed to find its way into being a horror cult classic anyway. To describe the premise, it's basically a slasher movie where the slasher villain is the rooms and traps that the heroes meet along the way. They don't know how they got into the cube, and they have to use maths to get out. The seemingly ragtag group of people that were introduced to at the beginning are slowly discovered to have their own strengths and skills that aid in managing to escape the cube, and it all comes together surprisingly well. In contrast to the original, the sequel has about 4 times the budget, which should lead to better script, better casting, better directing, better effects, right? Right?
Fuck off, Jerry!
Hypercube isn't just a terrible name for a sequel, it's also that illustration for a fourth dimensional object you always see. The one that people try to explain to you and you go, yeah, I think I get it. Basically, it's a cube with extra cube in it. Perhaps it would have been better off just going with a cube with extra cube in it, replace the characters and up the cube. But instead they tried to change a lot of the basic core of how this movie worked. This is a sequel, so inevitably I'm kind of going to talk about things that happen in the original, and I'm kind of going to spoil it. I would suggest watching that film first if you're interested in it, or you can check out Mr. Gigi's video in which he talks about it. I kind of made this video because he made that video, so thanks for the inspiration. I'll start by taking a moment to talk about the characters, something the movie never really does. First there's Kate, a psychotherapist, kind, caring, and willing to put herself in danger to help others. She has no other notable traits, which is actually true of most of the characters. They're absolutely fleshless, and unfortunately, it's not because it's been burned off by a gnarly trap. There's no time or space to get to know them, even within the quantum realm of the Hypercube, and it means that each person basically comes down to one character trait. Kate fills out the role of a final girl. She has quite a few dead lines in this thing. I'd give her performance maybe a 4 out of 10, which is probably still pushing it. Then there's Jerry. Jerry is the smart one. He's an engineer, and we find out later on that he built the doors to the Hypercube. Much like Worth from the previous movie, he holds onto this information far longer than makes any logical sense. He spurs a lot of the early exposition, he has the best grasp on what might be happening, and he's the first to use some intuition to start trying to unravel the cube. His acting is okay. He gets a 5 out of 10. He does a passable job. Simon is an asshole. He exists to sow tension among the group and is armed with a knife and a leather jacket from the get-go.
Alright, pretend that you're scared.
Should be easy.
He's the most entertaining performance, but it is also bad, 3 out of 10. Max is a game designer. He's mostly sarky. He does nothing and is a pointless addition to the cast. I was going to say his performance is pretty bad, but I've rewatched this thing numerous times now, and I'll be honest, he does a pretty admirable job, given how terrible every line he's given is. No one was making these lines sound not forced.
You mean like, beam me up, Scotty?
I'll let him get away with a 5 out of 10, making him the best actor in this thing. Similarly pointless is Julia. Several shots center around her bare feet, which is a bit weird. I can't see Quentin Tarantino in the producer credits. Huh? Zing. Movies, right? I'd give her feet an 8 out of 10. You know when you're scrolling through baddragon.com and you get past the dildos and you get to the section that's all like weird feet fleshlights and you're just like, who is buying this for that price, Oh, shit. Performance is also bad. 2 out of 10, maybe 3 in a push. Mrs. Paley is a theoretical mathematician. She is critically senile. It is at several points alluded to that she knows more than she's letting on, but it's hard to say for sure if she dies, and it never comes up. Her performance is hard to rate as well, because she's not really supposed to know what's going on, and when her goal is to not fit in with the scene she's in, terrible acting is easily covered. So she gets 4 out of 10? Sasha is blind, but she's got that daredevil blindness that gives you super hearing and a preternatural awareness of the world around you. My hottest take about Sasha is that you could have replaced her with a dog and not changed the movie at all, and not doing so is the greatest missed opportunity in this whole thing. Oh, also her being blind means nothing, it changes nothing. Her performance gets a 1. It is very, very bad. She is my least favourite character. I wish she was a dog. I'll even mention the Colonel, even though he dies almost immediately. He's always scared. He doesn't say much, but he's clearly a member of the Cube's management team and knows where he is and what's going on. He dies without passing on any vital information, but he serves as a clue to the audience, a clue that some of these people may have been put here to get rid of them, rather than to test them, like in the previous movie, or whatever you want to assume that was in the first movie. Okay, so that's all our characters. I think it's hard to say who counts as a character or not. There's this review on IMDb that says there's fucking 10 characters. I wrote that into the script originally before I counted it and realized there's not. Then there's the director who says there's 8, and I don't know who he's counting. Even if you include the colonel, that's like 7. So you'd have to add either this dead mathematician that comes in later or the girl from the beginnings. I don't know who he's referring to. I have not been able to get to the bottom of it in all of my searching. It still scares me to this day. Okay, so that's all the characters. Time to move on to the plot. And credit where credit's due, despite some corny acting and pretty mediocre dialogue, the first third of this movie is actually not all that bad. It could certainly do with less characters, smarter pacing, and more interesting traps to at least build some tension. But the doling out of information and some cute attention to detail make it not all too painful. I think the movie is more fun to watch than the last third, but not intentionally. We open with the scene of a woman we're never properly introduced to waking up in the cube. This kind of dreamy, sequency flashback montage lets you know that she's been cling filmed and kidnapped. She wanders into the next room and she must get really excited because, whee, she's off. Alright, I don't want to spend this whole movie just comparing and contrasting it to the first one, but it's hard not to when all the things that they've changed and removed in this sequel are the things that made the first work. Cube 1 opens with a scene of someone waking up in the cube, moving into the next room, and being immediately minced by one of those bloody swing traps from every Skyrim dungeon. In essence, it's the exact same opener, right? But why does it work there and completely not work here? Well, in the first film, it's our entire introduction to the cube, the idea that there are traps in the room. It makes you go, oh shit, and it's brutal and affecting. The ominous energy in the entire scene lets you know this guy is defo about to be making the trek to the other side, but the brutality and style of it is what you don't expect. It sets up a movie that will be unforgiving, savage, and gory, and it probably cost half the movie's budget just for the VFX used, but it's worth it, because it makes an impact. In the sequel, there's the same cold open, same ominous energy, and same unexpected death. It doesn't work here, though, because you've seen the first movie and you know what to expect to happen in the cube. You know the series of rooms should contain unforgiving traps and kills. If you have seen the first movie, this scene just tells you that you should expect far less visceral gore. It's not interested in showing you that. This scene could happen in a children's movie. And if you haven't seen the first cube, it still tells you nothing of what to expect in these rooms. This movie hasn't got the bevy of traps up its sleeve. Instead, it's just got this one CGI spinning cube, and it can't get that out yet. So it's replaced it with this. So what is the point of this scene at all? If you removed it from the film, you know what you lose? You lose 5 minutes of runtime, and I don't think anyone's complaining. Then there's the second cold open. We see the Colonel frantically checking around the door and whispering about trying to find the numbers.
God damn numbers.
If you've seen the first movie, you know what that means, and if you haven't, then it still works as a clear show of someone who knows where they are and what's going on, and yet it's clear it's not as he expected. Something is wrong. Even the guy who knows what's going on, he doesn't know what's going on. He checks his briefcase, finds it's empty, and starts breaking down, lying in the corner, repeating the Lord's Prayer, as we slowly fade to black. This scene isn't a cinematic masterpiece. The cinematography could be improved, among other things, but it's a damn sight better than the actual cold open of the film. It sows the same ominous atmosphere. It tips you off that things are going to be different, that even those who have seen the original Cube are going to be in alien territory here. This should have been how the movie opened. After that, we fade back in, and we introduce Kate as she opens a door in the cube. She finds Simon playing dead on the floor before he tackles her. They both explain that they've been through multiple rooms and haven't seen anyone else before weird whispering noises echo around them. Max opens a door above them, and Simon grabs Kate and tells her to act scared for show. We see the door above them close, and the shots pan down to the door beside them to open again, to the same scene of Max looking in, and then it closes, opens on the other side, bounces about. Every time it's Max in a different place, but still clearly in the same room. What's going on? I get that the intent is to make the audience go, oh wow, Cube 1 couldn't do that. This isn't your grandpa's cube. But honestly, what the fuck is he doing? What is this silent game of peekaboo he's decided to start? Can't help but think, this really isn't the time, my guy. There's a hostage. You've been kidnapped. Everything is teleporting. Aside from that, the camera work here, panning around as Max pops up like a whack-a-mole in different doors, is pretty well done, and sells the idea that the rooms aren't moving mechanically. There's some deeper sci-fi stuff going on here. Interestingly, in the behind the scenes, they only had half a cube, so all of this panning around is actually CG, which is interesting because you can't tell. It's really seamlessly worked in and is quite impressive compared to some of the other CG in the film. Wait, I'll get to it. As Kate escapes into the next room, we meet Sasha huddled in the corner. We're also quickly introduced to Jerry. He explains that he's been going through rooms for hours and scratches the number 4 into the side of the cube. This is the 4th room he's been in, despite having been through rooms for hours. Intriguing. They open the next room to find Max, holding the Colonel's legs, attempting to stop him from self-induced suffocation using his tie. I speak coyly to avoid demonetization. Simon attempts to interrogate the Colonel as he's on death's door. He mumbles about the first one, mentions its rules and how you use the codes to get out, how the first cube had numbers. At this point, the wall starts freaking out. Sasha freaks out. The wall starts making its way towards them and melting everything in its path. The Colonel handcuffs himself to the wall, dry swallows the key like a Chad, and we get a very disappointing scene of his death. Like, look at this shot of his feet. This could be in a PG movie. It's so lame. And that's the most we get. This movie has no teeth. They spent all their effects budget on shifting walls and interdimensional phenomena and nothing on the death scenes. But it's a sequel to The Cube, man! Come on, I want to see some people melt! Jerry reveals he helped make the doors to the cube an exact copy of the scene from the last movie. It mostly drives up tension and is forgotten as quickly as it comes out when Mrs. Paley notices a tesseract marked on the floor. Jerry explains the concept of the 4th dimension, of the hypercube, and posits that that's why the rooms are repeating, why things are moving, why space seems to make no sense. They spot the number 60659 on the roof, same as they spotted in a previous room. So it's worth noting in this movie that the first third or so is actually a pretty solid foundation. They could do with some more time actually going into the characters a little bit, but it is what it is. And as what it is alright. There's too many characters, but the pacing is good, information keeps coming in, and a lot of the hooks actually present an interesting mystery. The characters and acting are still poor, and too many of the basic beats are rehashed from the first, but there's the bones of something here. Max opens the next door and sees Julia on the floor, and when he dives in to follow his boner, "Hey Max, I think we've got a website for you." He finds that gravity shifts between rooms. They take the time after her rescue to sit and discuss who each of them are. It's nothing in terms of actual character development, but it gives us some backstory. Anyway, they once again see the number 60659, and Simon finds a watch, the same watch Jerry has been scratching numbers into the doors with. But Jerry still has his watch, and the engraving makes it clear that these are definitely the same watch. The plot thickens. Time-space shenanigans are on the horizon. Could get there a bit quicker, though. I definitely think they needed another bit of action in here. I guess that's why when they move into the next room, they find a dead physicist on the floor. He does like a little death fake-out. I guess it's more of an alive fake-out because he is actually dead. The dead guy is a theoretical physicist. Some of them recognize him as a leading expert on quantum chaos, and it appears he's the one who's been writing the number 60659, though why he has been writing it in random rooms beats me. Then they loot his body for a pen. They also figure out that Mrs. Paley worked for a weapons manufacturer, but it seems like she was against whatever it was they were doing. This is kind of confusing because, you know, given how senile she is, she must have been working there several years ago. So this will come back later. Mrs. Paley, looking for her dog, opens the door below them and sees on the other side herself. Oh shit, this room leads into itself. What kind of Doctor Strange Quantumania madness is this? As she holds up her hand to the reflection, it grabs her and says, "Help me. This ain't no reflection." And then she falls back as we see Simon wielding his knife behind her. In a daze, he says, "Don't trust the old bitch." And then, Simon, move, just back. No, just, Oh, that's a shame. Let's just take a moment to properly appreciate this shot. Simon's head is gently removed by this little 4th dimensional ripple. No blood, and if you slow it down, you can see the clean matte line where the effects team just painted his head off. It's masterful work. Reading some interviews behind the scenes, apparently the effects team were really proud of the job they did in this movie, and this CGI work is cutting edge, but I gotta say, some of it has not aged super the best. Jerry explains that this must be some kind of parallel reality within the cube, a different Mrs. Paley and a different Simon. I figured this was going to be a flash to the future and we'd see this soon later, but this movie isn't clever enough, at least from this point forward, enough to orchestrate that. See, this is where the movie finally kicks it up again. Finishes with that careful layout of information and goes full B-movie from here on out. From this point forward, we leave the structurally sound safety and step into the new frontier of a collapsing narrative, nonsensical decisions, muddled character motivations, and full scenery-chewing performances. Abandoned structure. From here on, it all falls apart, which is so thematically appropriate, it's almost as if they intended it. There's a little montage of them going through rooms where they play some more exposition that they couldn't naturally fit into the film. It's strange and out of place, but don't worry about that, because it's time to use the entire rest of the budget on some terrible early 2000s CGI. Why did I clap? Why did I clap? This little square manifests itself in the middle of the room and then multiplies until it becomes a spinning death spear and... oh no, it kills Jerry! My sweet summer child!
Oh, Jesus.
Love the Foley work, by the way. Oh, my pasta's ready. Oh shit, I have to actually have, like, a ready meal ready for that shot, huh?
It just sounds like shit. That doesn't work at all, does it? Fuck.
Seriously though, on rewatch, I'm realizing that Jerry is the only likable character at all. Simon's an asshole by design, Max is a sulky dick, Julia sucks, Sasha just complains, Mrs. Paley is... well, Mrs. Paley. I guess Kate is fine, but Jerry is the only person I go for a beer with. I feel like he's the kind of guy who would buy the first round, but insist on paying for his drink on the next one. He'd have some interesting things to talk about, and most of all, he'd be happy to be spending time with you, you know? He'd spend like 2 hours eating you out, and then he'd make you dinner. He just seems like a nice guy, that's what I'm saying. Some of this needs to be cut. Going back for a moment to the CGI in this movie, and this is again according to the Inverse article, this was actually some pretty cutting edge tech at the time, so I assume this looked pretty good. Originally in the script I went on a mini rant here about practical effects versus early CGI and how this couldn't have looked convincing, but I realised A, I could just ask someone who was there, and B, they were still figuring CGI out. Everyone saw Jurassic Park and said, oh shit, you can do that with computers, but didn't realise that movie used a lot of low lighting for the CGI shots and clever directing. This is the director's second movie, him being mostly a cinematography guy who actually worked on some pretty big stuff like American Psycho and a couple Tarantino movies. And stuff like how to effectively apply CGI was just not in his wheelhouse, I guess. Especially not on a $250,000 budget. The rest escape, and Simon starts going psycho, ties up Mrs. Paley and threatens her to get information. Simon's acting is just getting hammier and hammier with each scene, and it's like seeing a butterfly take flight from its cocoon. Before we can get any information, fourth dimensional anomalies begin to infest the room, and Mrs. Paley is caught. She grabs onto Simon as he tries to help against his better judgment, and in order to get free, he stabs her, so doesn't do the best job. As Julia and Max try to leave him behind, they enter some strange time shenanigans. So, you see these rooms with variable times here. Yeah, Max came up with that. Okay, well, not literally these rooms, just the concept for a video game, but like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, in the same way as screenwriters for this movie did? Or you made a video game that could change the user's perception of time? The way he suggests it, it sounds like he made a system that functionally made it so one player would play at a different speed to another.
Are you saying that you designed all this?
Just these variable time speed rooms, just the concept.
This is really some game, Max.
The concept for that is nothing. The actual execution is... tech beyond the scope of video games, my dude. You learned how to edit time. Honestly, I don't think the writers know. I think they just wanted a reason for him to be on Izon's bad list. Oh, right, Izon. So, well, actually, at this point, let's start putting some puzzle pieces together. So Max made this video game concept, which some company stole off him, and he's in the midst of a legal suit. Julia, as it turns out, is the lawyer for the company that owns the company that he's suing. That company being Izon, the weapons manufacturer.
I thought Izon was
A weapons manufacturer.
Yes.
Mrs. Paley is, well, was a theoretical mathematician working at Izon, and was disagreeing with whatever it was they were working on.
She worked for Skippy Research Affiliates, and her dog's name was Izon.
Is it possible that you worked for Izon Research Affiliates and your dog's name was Skippy? How did you know where I worked?
Oh, God.
The Colonel from the beginning was one of the higher-ups involved, and he was saying all that shit about there being no way out and that they were put here to die. So why is Julia in here? I don't know. This is what I'm saying. Both these characters are entirely superfluous. Rip them out of the script and it doesn't matter. The only things their backstories add are answers to each other's backstories. Having one of them requires the other, but take them out and nothing changes. Exemplified by the fact that they've just figured this out, and spoilers, they both fucking die in the next scene without telling anyone. That's how non-plot relevant they are at this point. They start making out, an act so out of left field the screenwriters didn't have an explanation and they just break the fourth wall to let us know.
In the real world, I'd never kiss you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You're not my type.
You're not my type either.
The Academy Award for Best Picture.
Cube 2.
This is not a joke. This is not a joke.
They start making the beast with two backs, and then, in the most baffling scene in the movie, they just sort of fuck to death. They levitate off the floor and fuck to death. I don't know. I don't have answers. The movie doesn't have answers. I think they just needed to get rid of them. We cut back to Simon, left on his own, when he fucking RKOs your boy Jerry. Jerry has no memory of the events we've seen. In fact, he's only just arrived in the cube. This is a parallel past Jerry we're dealing with here.
Can I ask you a question, Jerry? Do you mind?
And this point is where Simon finally loses the rag entirely, and I think...
Are you hungry? Are you hungry?
I think he...
Because I'm hungry.
I think he eats Jerry.
I'm fucking starving.
Let's say the boring part of this movie is 60% as good as in a good movie. And that might be pushing it, but go with me here, right? If that's the case, then the fun part of this movie is maybe 20% as good as in a good movie. Like, if we compare this to, like, Aliens, to use a sci-fi movie comparison, and the first half of the movie is basically the lead up to the first alien attack scene, it would be 40% as interesting, and fuck, 4 times as long, but goddamn, the bit where they're fighting the aliens, this movie is like 5% as good. And we're just talking raw quality here, because if I'm being truly honest, the main reason I'd recommend this movie is to get to the part where everyone dies in like 200 seconds. It makes me think that the director got to this point in the movie and realized they only had the cube rented for another 15 minutes and was like, ah, shit, guys, we gotta wrap this up. You're dead, fucking gone. It seems so unplanned, so pointless, that I wonder if the stage directions just said, add death scene here, and they just panicked on set. So, while Simon is out chewing down on some more Jerrys, Kate and Sasha wander into this absurd tableau where all their bodies are just chilling out, having fully decayed, but it's like the cleanest decay you've ever seen. Someone just chucked them on the rack to dry them into beef jerky. And we find out Sasha is some super hacker that's been foreshadowed the whole movie, which makes total sense. Blind hacker in 2002 must have just been turning on the audio assist. It totally makes sense. Sasha then lays it out that the cube is collapsing. Bit by bit, all time and space in the cube is becoming one as the rooms erode, piece by piece. We cut back to Simon, and Jerry must be delicious, because he's eaten like 6 of them now. He manages to find his way to Kate and Sasha.
Come on in. The water's fine.
Last time Kate saw this dude, he was acting completely normal. They have no idea he's gone all hungry caterpillar on the place, so Kate just does not fuck around. Well, anyway, she stabs him in the eye and then turns around, and he's standing there having grabbed Sasha and aged 10 years. So I guess he's been here for like 10 years, just surviving on rogue Jerry's. It makes no sense. He explains it like this.
Don't be so stupid, Kate. You know time works differently in this place.
Which explains nothing. This is the only room left in the cube. Where the fuck have you been? He lands his execution on Sasha, and then Kate ferries him to the afterlife. Been waiting a real long time to just immediately fuck that revenge up, huh, Simon? Genuinely, the first time I watched this film, I got to this scene, and asked myself, wait, where is everyone? Before I realised that everyone died in the last, 200 seconds. Kate realises the number 60659 is a reference to the time the cube will collapse, which, I mean, okay, but why wouldn't he at least once write it down in the format of a time? It seems like a weird... You know what? I'm getting bogged down in logic here. We left that behind 35 minutes ago. The cube is collapsing down, and as Miss Paley and Sasha mentioned earlier, it's unstable, and at 60659, it'll collapse entirely. Kate leaps into the abyss as the last space within the cube burns away, and I guess that was the answer. How to get out was just to wait until it finished. But I thought the point was that they were put here to die? Were these guys just banking on them killing each other? Because, shit, good bet, you win. Simon over here was a ringer for that one. It's confusing, though, because they were clearly put here to die. That was the point. And yet, in the director's behind the scenes, he says that this was intended as the answer to the way out. This was how they were supposed to escape. But they were supposed to die. And I'm assuming that if they had got out, they would have been shot by this firing squad. I'll talk about that in a second. But it's suggested in this ending that Kate went willingly into the cube to gather some sort of information on this necklace, and then they just shoot her, and it's like, okay, I know you didn't want this to do the same thing as the first movie and leave us with nothing, but, what is this? What am I supposed to do with this? It's like when your grandparents give you a DVD box set of The Life and Times of the Who, and you're like, oh, sick, thanks, I'm going to watch this. And it's like, I really appreciate you trying to get me into this, Grandpa. I really like this band that you're trying to get me into and all, but man, me and the boys have been blasting the Lonely Island and Monster Cat tracks the last year. This just really isn't my scene, may God rest his soul. What were we talking about? Oh, right, the movie. So I managed to find this extended ending on YouTube that came with the DVD, and I found out that I hate this guy here at the end, who only has a couple lines in the normal ending. Here, he's got a few minutes to shine, and oh boy do I hate how he delivers every line. He's going for a creepy, calm tone, but mixed with the horrible acting, it just grates on me so bad. This ending elaborates the point that Kate is an operative for this agency and not a psychotherapist or whatever it was she was saying, and she was sent to kill Sasha, the super hacker. I mean, okay, it's a twist, I guess, but it's not like watching this movie back you can spot subtle hints or anything. It just feels tacked on. I guess that's why they eliminated this as the hidden ending. Also mentioned in this ending is the fact that they were only in the cube for 6 minutes, which tracks if you pay attention to Jerry's watch each time it's shown. Alright, so let's get all our puzzle pieces and put them together to try and get to the bottom of this mystery. Kate here is not a psychotherapist. She's an agent of the Cube elite sent to kill Sasha, aka Alex the super hacker. Alex is in the cube because she went in to escape from said Cube elite. Terrible place to try and escape to. Yeah, it's the last place they'd follow you. That's because the only way out is to die or just be dumped out right here where you presumably went in, so all they had to do is wait. For a super genius, it's a really flawed plan. Jerry made the doors, and I'm assuming they want anyone who knows anything about anything to do with the cube eliminated, so that's why he's here. Julia and Max are here because of their legal suit thing. It doesn't matter, they're irrelevant to the greater narrative. Mrs. Paley is here because, like Jerry, she knew stuff, but I don't really understand because she couldn't have been helping any time recently, given her mental state. So I'm going to give the movie the benefit of the doubt and assume they're putting her in here now, rather than earlier, because she's reached such a point where she's unknowingly giving out secrets. It's basically fan fiction, but if the writers aren't going to think about it, then I will. Simon told Jerry in an earlier scene that he's in the cube because someone hired him to find this girl, Becky. Becky does pop up for a second when Simon manages to find her in the cube, but he's gone crazy and he kills her. We find out she's some kind of eyes-on employee, and given that he was kidnapped and brought here, I assume that he got too close to some shit, so they wanted to get rid of him sniffing around the cube. I don't know why Becky's here. It's not important. She probably did some shit. So, the questions I have are this. Why is Julia here? Why is it essentially not only possible, but quite easy to get out if the intent was for the people here to die? Why did they bother to send someone in to kill Sasha if not only did they expect everyone to die, but also everyone gets dumped out here anyway? Why weren't everyone's corpses dumped out here? Was that act of jumping at the end really that integral to escaping? Why is there only one person and only one Kate who managed to make it out if there are so many parallel universes in the cube? Did she only make it out in one universe? I don't know. I don't know, the writers don't know, the director doesn't know. I'd like to take a moment to go back to that alternate ending I found on YouTube and and take a look at the comments. They're a great read. First off, there's this guy pointing out that they can make a hypercube but still use a rotary phone, which is a salient point. Here's Tronimus pointing out that when Max and Julia bang, they should have noticed they were aging, especially with Max being the inventor of that concept. And I'd like to point out the bit where they started levitating. They should have been like, huh? In the behind the scenes, you can see the swing set that they used for them to have sex on, and if someone didn't sneak in after they finished shooting and have sex on that swing, I'm so disappointed. But my favourite comment is this one from someone who had a very different experience with this movie than I did. They thought the acting was all great, and the characters very likeable, and like, you know what, if you like this movie, then good for you. More power to you. I have to say that over the course of writing this review, I just let the movie run on repeat in the background. Each viewing, I somehow look over and find something new to enjoy and look at. I'm sure I might be laughing more at the movie than with it, but I've got to have watched it through 4 or 5 times now, and I'd watch it again. Maybe not tomorrow, but in the spirit of watching a shitty movie with friends, this is definitely an easy watch. Apparently Simon is very sexy too. Not my cup of tea, but to each their own. But genuinely, if you watch this movie and you really enjoyed it, then, you know, more power to you. You didn't have the same experience I did, but that's fine. I think the beauty of art and of movie is that everyone can watch something and have a different experience. That's what makes it valuable. That's what art is about. It's not about the person who made it. It's not about the director and what they wanted you to get. It's not about the writers and what they wanted you to get out of it, or the actors or anyone else. The experience you take away from it is what matters. And that experience is yours. If you watched this with friends and you laughed at how dumb it was, then the movie had value. If you're glad you watched it for any reason, then I think that is kind of the point. Even if it's because it was bad, you were still entertained. It's still an experience you had, and that's what makes art matter. I think that's what makes art so powerful, is that anyone can have a different experience. Everyone can enjoy things in a different way. This is yours, and it's yours alone. No one else's. This movie is bad, though. 3 out of 10.